Just so everyone knows, even though there's only three board members present currently, we are about to go live on Access Humboldt. So I'm going to fire us up as well. But obviously we're still waiting, so people are going to see some of our delightful conversations.
We got Elaine and Leslie and Sophia. I think we may have everybody here. Is that correct?
We are currently missing Robin.
Robin, correct.
That's it. That is correct. Yeah, Robin is not in yet. I haven't heard anything from him. I don't know if you have, Jim.
Say what?
I have not either.
15.
Who is, oh, okay, no. That's,
Again, in Moto E5 Play, I don't know if you can hear me, but if I could put a name to the non-face, that'd be great.
Hi, guys.
Hi,
You could put Mario Calson for the LEA in attendance.
Mario.
excellent.
Thank you.
So while we haven't heard anything from Robin, we do have a quorum. So Frank, it's your discretion as to whether you want to convene and start the meeting, or if you want to wait for a few minutes.
Yeah, we're only short one person at this point.
That's
Not
correct.
hurt anybody. For a quorum.
Okay. I'm just gonna go ahead and start, and we'll get through this. So I'd like to call to order the monthly meeting of HWMA Board of Directors. Roll call, please.
Barrera,
Here.
Castellano,
Here.
Hogan. I know she's hiding there somewhere. Bone.
Yep.
Smith. I don't even see him waiting yet. And Wilson.
Here.
Nice jacket, Tyler.
Oh, thank you. Feeling snazzy tonight.
No, it returned you when you tried to pop down.
All right, this is the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the HWMA board and will be enacted upon by one motion unless a specific request for a review is made by a board member or a member of the public. The consent calendar will not be read. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless pulled for discussion. The items are approval of minutes of February 11th and received January 2021 financials. Would anyone on the board wish to pull an item? Hearing none, is there anybody in the public that would wish to pull an item? I don't watch the hands raised, but apparently there's no hands raised. So with that in mind, I will entertain a motion to accept the consent calendar.
Make a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Barrera,
Aye.
Castellano,
Aye.
Hogan. Oh, she's muted.
She was here, wasn't she?
No, she's
Yeah, she's here.
Hi, am I here? Can you guys hear me? Yeah.
There we go. Bone.
Yep.
Wilson.
Yes,
And Smith is absent.
motion passes. Next item is item number 3, the oral and written communications. This is the time provided for people to address the board or to submit written communications concerning matters not on this agenda. Board members may respond to statements, but any request that requires board action will be referred to staff for review. Reasonable time limits may be imposed on both the total amount of time allotted for the item and on the time permitted to each individual speaker. Such time allotment or portion thereof shall not be transferred to any other speaker. We have any public comment?
I do not see any hands raised, and I did not receive any written communication.
And neither did I.
All right. With that, I will close public comment, and we will move on to the next item is to receive and discuss draft fiscal year 2020, 21, and 22 budget, provided direction as appropriate. Executive Director, is this over to Tyler?
Yeah, I'll just do a quick introduction. We'll have Tyler give the presentation for the board members, and then we'll take any questions when we are complete. So turning it over to your hands, Tyler.
Thank you. So for the sake of this presentation, I will mostly be referring to page 31 of 35 in the board packet. If everybody wants to head for that, especially those playing at home. This is attachment B, which is the draft waste management fees for fiscal year 2021-22, which covers the period of July 1, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. So when I'm throwing fiscal years out, it's always going to be that July to June time frame. This is intended as something of a quick onboarding for our newest member, who unfortunately isn't here tonight, but in the replay will hopefully be able to help out a little bit. And for everybody, it's kind of a nice primer, so bear with me a little bit on this. HWMA creates its annual budget via estimation of annual tonnage. So when we look at attachment B, this is why I focus on this page so much. In a nutshell, it is almost the entire activity for HWMA. It covers approximately $13 million in expenses and therefore $13 million in revenue generated. And what we look at is estimating tonnage each year to determine how fully funded our programs are going to be and any problems we may run into. So at present, staff is estimating a total of 75,000 tons of solid waste in. Now, this has fluctuated in the last few years between about 72, 74, upwards of 80,000 tons. But we attempt to maintain the 75,000 ton limit, because if we overestimate and we overfund programs and depend on that money and it's not there, of course, we run into problems of supporting those programs through the entire year. At mid-year, if we find that we have more tonnage, a significant portion of that expense that is gained or that is created by that is going to be eaten up by the revenue that was gained. And then we can allot the additional revenue as needed to programs or projects that need that money. Or of course, put that towards reserves for ongoing projects in future years. So there are 4 major components to our tip fees. As you'll see in attachment B, the 4 places we generate fees from are the Hawthorne Street Transfer Station self-haul and franchise fees. And these are the fees that we pay or we charge at the gate to any customer, whether it's a resident, commercial customer, or any of our franchise haulers. This is where a primarily 60,000 tons of our material comes from, but we don't collect all of our tonnage at the transfer station. We also have 2 satellite facilities which collect tonnage for mostly franchise route collection and the occasional residential drop-off for our member agencies. And those are, of course, the facility located with Humboldt Sanitation up in McKinleyville, and Recology Eel River down in Fortuna. They bring in primarily their franchise tonnage that's closer to those facilities because it saves everybody money. And that's really what we're here to do. But there is a component of that fee that we collect to make sure all of our projects and programs are fully funded. And finally, there are the countywide program fees, which are collected on every single ton of material that's generated in Humboldt County. Where this differs from the other fees is that there are tons that are delivered directly to landfill by neither franchise haulers nor HWMA. These are just residents and contractors. A very good example of this is Alves Construction, which generates a lot of C&D material and then handles it itself. They report that tonnage to HWMA. We bill them for those countywide program fees that are about $24, and then they pay us for those fees, which are then generally passed through mostly to the programs that they are listed here. We'll go through those in just a bit. So as mentioned, these rates generate about $13 million in revenue, which is spent to maintain the various operations and programs that HWMA provides. The components, as you'll see on attachment B, are three very distinct portions. I'm going to start from the bottom and move up because it's a little bit easier to understand, I think, that way. So the first component is our facility fees. These are the fees that we charge at the Hawthorne Street Transfer Station specifically for management of that facility. Most all of this money is either based on the operating and indirect costs for maintaining solid waste operations at the transfer station, or the long-term debt that we have created to have the transfer station and have the operations that we currently use. Other smaller components are things such as asset acquisition specific to the transfer station itself, and some smaller components of hazardous waste and recycling. You'll note that for our satellite facilities, there's a big orange box. And that's another reason I like this page. It's the only one that's got color in my extremely boring sea of budget documents. This portion represents a part of the operations that HWMA doesn't want to and cannot control. These are the facility costs that Recology Eel River and Humboldt Sanitation charge to maintain their own facilities while collecting our satellite fees. The portion that we charge them is almost entirely transportation and disposal of solid waste. It's the only part that we cover. It's the only part that they expect from us. And therefore, in return, if you're ever part of their contract negotiations, if you're ever looking at the contracts, you'll notice that the rates are going to differ from our rates for franchise because those facilities need to charge what they need to charge. And we aren't always privy to those, which is perfectly fine. The second portion is the base fees. These are the fees that we charge to our ratepayers in our jurisdictions for a number of programs and items that they've all committed to through board action. So additional expenses at the Cummings Road landfill, above and beyond our pledge of revenue, which I'll get to in a minute, universal programs, recycling programs that are still provided, often directly at the transfer station, and of course, administrative fees for my staff and I to maintain billing and reporting for all of the different tonnage. These are all charged solely on satellite fees and Hawthorne Street transfer station fees. The final component are the program fees. These are the countywide program fees that are charged on every ton, and they cover a wide variety of items. Hazardous waste is almost exclusively funded through the countywide program fees, because whether or not people use our facilities for trash, they often do for hazardous waste, because we're one of the few places you can actually get that service in Humboldt County. There are, of course, small administrative fees, some additional program fees in addition to the AB 939 fees, which are passed through to all of our member agencies. And then there are those items that are set by other agencies. And these are primarily the code enforcement fees for the county environmental health local enforcement agency, which oversees all of the regulatory permitting for all of the transfer stations and charges a fee set by the California Code of Regulations to every transfer station for their work. The other two are the Table Bluff landfill maintenance fee, as well as the rural container site operation fees that the Humboldt County Department of Public Works charges to maintain rural container sites and maintain the Table Bluff landfill. And those are set by our JPA. Those are costs that we send to the county specifically to maintain those. And every year they reevaluate those costs and let us know if there are any increases or decreases in those fees. And this, again, will become important just a little bit later. However, when we look at the budget as a whole, the assumptions that we build on it are not just tonnage. For the draft budget, there are a number of assumptions that build the numbers you're looking at currently to reach a balanced budget. Notably, there's a 2% CPI applied to every contract that we have. This is mostly for transportation and disposal, but can also apply to our rental agreement with Recology Humboldt County for their rent of 949 West Hawthorne. A lot of the information that goes into these assumptions, I received between March and April. In fact, in the week between sending out this board packet and this meeting, I've already received new numbers. That means, of course, that they're going to change slightly for the final budget, but we attempt to keep them as reasonable as possible so that those adjustments aren't going to be a surprise when we get to the final budget. And part of this is because we have to put the budget out in May so that our member agencies have May through June to coordinate fee increases with their franchise haulers. So that's why we've always presented in May. That's why we're always about a month or two early on our draft budget, so that we're considering our changes well in advance of anything that our member agencies need to see. The problem, of course, is in the draft, I'm giving you some best guesstimates, and that CPI is one of them. The other one is I do my best guess on increases for personnel costs, and this relates to insurance increases, workers' compensation costs, CalPERS benefits. Some of these I know, some of these I don't quite know, but I do have historical data to build upon, and I build those into our payroll numbers, again, to lessen the impact of the final budget's actual numbers. Included in this year's assumptions, there is no cost of living increase to our employees. We didn't do one last year either because we implemented our new salary plan from our salary survey, which was completed in 2020. And between that salary survey, some of the things that happened during the pandemic and some of the challenges there in making sure that our staff was safe, but was also working. And of course, merit increases for the activities that our staff is performing anyway. We feel that our staff has gotten a pretty fair shake this year, in addition to helping us deal with the pandemic. So that 0% COLA is in there. The board is more than willing, more than able to discuss it. And if they would like to see a number in there, we can certainly talk about that. And then finally, the last assumption is that all programs are fully funded either on their own or through the waste management fees. So when we look at building the budget, every program that we provide is fully funded. Mainly, this will be recycling activities. This will be hazardous waste, but it also covers a lot of our diversion programs, such as green waste management, carpet, mattress handling, all of that. All of those programs that are often passed through at no charge to our ratepayers, the budget has to cover those somewhere. And our assumption is the board wants to continue those. Are there any questions up to this point? Because I'm talking a lot.
Doing a great job.
Thanks. A little water. Here we go. So the second component to the budget is our capital projects, our reserves, and our long-term debt. I'm going to start with our long-term debt because it's both exciting and like one of the primary chunks of our annual budget. So in 2002, the authority took out a bond issue to expand the Hawthorne Street transfer station to kind of what it is today, at least physically. A lot of the programs didn't come online until later or aren't where they are now in 2002, but that expansion led to what you see when you're at 1059 West Hawthorne. Likewise, in 2005, we took a second bond issue to buy out Waste Solutions Group, which is the contractor that was running all of the operations at the transfer station for HWMA prior to that date. And that buyout brought the authority to what you see it as today in a personnel view. So this is the approximately 40 people that are operating all of our solid waste and diversion operations, operating hazardous waste. This is my office staff and myself. This is everybody that now comes together and creates HWMA on a regular basis. So it's more the personnel change that leads to today versus the physical from 2002. We, for the longest time, we're spending about $1.2 million per year for that long-term debt. And in 2015, we were faced with a number of challenges to our cash flow, mostly around closure of the Cummings Road landfill and remediation of the Cummings Road burn ash site. Looking at a lot of the cash flow issues we had at that point, because this was millions of dollars for two very significant and important projects, we were fortunate in that our bond counsel approached us with an opportunity to refinance those bonds under a loan. And so we put out a proposal, we got a very competitive one from Chase Bank, and we refinanced not only those bonds, but some of the other loans we had taken out to bridge the funding during closure proceedings into a new loan, which reduced our costs by about $400,000 per year. Overall, this is going to save the authority about $2 million by the sunset of the long-term debt. And the exciting part about this is that we didn't change the sunset date. So in this draft budget, there is approximately $800,000 in payments to our long-term debt that will occur on November 1st, 2021. When those payments happen, the authority will be free and clear of its original long-term debt. Yes, I'm very excited. Like, I get very, very excited about this part. So we're looking at the final time that we will need to charge that $800,000 in our annual budget specifically for that, but not hopefully for other things that come up. And that is where we'll get to when we get to reserves, which here we are. So as a brief review of our reserves, reserve policies set by the board have established 4 reserve funds. The first is an undesignated reserve, which is set at 15% of current operating costs in the draft budget. This is our absolute emergency fund. It is utilized for either projects that come up mid-year that could not have been foreseen at the beginning of the year. A great example is when we implemented the carpet care recycling program. We were told all of the costs would be covered, but we didn't know for sure how long that was going to last. And so we knew that we could utilize the undesignated reserves to balance that as needed. And of course, this covers other things like catastrophic failure of equipment, or other major emergency spending that we need to do, or unplanned projects that come up through direction of the board. So it's a very useful fund that we don't touch very often, but it is a good tool to have. It was also our first reserve fund, so it's been around for a while. The second is our rate stabilization fund. This is a more specific emergency fund that is focused primarily on balancing changes in mostly transportation and disposal costs. A really good example of this is, for instance, when Last Chance Grade slides over Highway 101 and slows down our ability to deliver solid waste up to Dry Creek Landfill. The last couple of months, we worked really hard to make sure that trash is still moving at a functional pace, but there is a lot of extra cost associated with that. And the rate stabilization fund, if needed, is specifically for those types of expenses. It helps maintain our rates so that in the next year, all I'm planning for is replenishing that reserve to $400,000 while we deal with any additional costs that come our way. Third is our personnel stabilization fund. This is $150,000 that is used primarily to offset the full funding of employee pay in an attempt to give management and staff the ability to engage in merit-based increases and discussions of performance without impacting the budget. In old budgets, we would literally plan for what raises would happen at the beginning of every year, and that was it. So there wasn't a lot of leeway. Now positions are fully encumbered as employees merit either perhaps raises or promotions. We have a lot more flexibility to provide that to our staff. And that reserve pretty much solely covers that. If there is the occasional strange change to like our insurance rates or other benefits, it would also help offset those costs. That does not happen very often. And then finally, there's the Capital Improvement Fund. This fund is tied to the Capital Improvement Plan as was presented in November of 2020. And this plan dictates how we implement all of our major capital asset projects and purchases. Currently, that is mostly for equipment upgrades and maintenance at the Cummings Road landfill and in our transfer station operations. And so this is the continued replenishment of heavy equipment or maintenance of the well and the leachate wells and the methane system at the landfill or other equipment that the landfill might use specifically that is more expensive than any staff member has expenditure authority over, or for which there are multiple years of planning. Most of you will remember in November, we removed a planned project for a MRF at the transfer station, but that is exactly the kind of big ticket item that we would see put on there. And one of the benefits of seeing the end of our long-term debt is that we're going to be able to have some pretty big discussions around some of the bigger items that the authority is looking at participating in. SB 1383 is a huge one that's on everybody's mind right now, but also re-implementation of CRV buyback is going to be a longer term discussion and have costs associated with it that aren't just flipping a switch back on at the transfer station. And so when we look at that plan and the fund, we make sure that the fund has enough money to handle the projects currently, but also where capable, future projects as they have already been outlined. And it always bears repeating that while these projects are in the plan, nothing is set in stone until the board takes action on them in a subsequent meeting. These will always be brought before the board of directors. So with the draft budget, we are looking for direction from the board on a very few specific things. Namely, when we talk about this, we're talking about what the tip fee does each year. This often is represented in a percentage increase. It might be a straight dollar amount increase or decrease, although that's been a long while off. And so we look to the board to guide us in terms of what the tip fee is going to do, because it ultimately impacts not only our ratepayers at the gate, but all of your franchise contracts, our satellite facilities, and occasionally everyone who pays those countywide program fees. I think it bears mentioning where the tip fee has been for the past few years. So in looking at what we have in fiscal year 2015 and 16, we requested and received an approximately 1% increase in tip fees. That is the last time that we have changed tip fees since, which is a pretty big thing for the authority. We haven't had that level of stability pretty much ever. It's always fluctuated, whether it was up or down, especially when it spiked during the diesel fuel crisis of 2008. We've had major changes to the tip fee pretty much every year that the authority has existed. And this is the first time that we've had a 5-year period of complete 0% change and stability. It's been pretty great. On page 31, you'll notice at the bottom, underneath those bolded lines for the total proposed waste management fees, you'll see some non-bolded numbers, and those are the current tip fees. So that 155.82, the 129.01, and everything else to the right of those are what we currently charge. And the bolded items are what we're currently requesting, which means that for the first time in 5 years, we are requesting that the board direct an increase in tip fees of 57 cents per ton. And that's applied to all tip fees. The reason is, for the first time in about 4 years, the county LEA has requested an increase in their countywide pass-through fee from $3.13 to $3.70, which is 57 cents. And there are two ways to approach this, and we are asking the board to just apply it to the current tip fee. The other way, as I mentioned before, there have been no changes in tip fees for 5 years, but 4 years ago, there was an increase to the LEA fee. And the reason we didn't change tip fees is at that point, staff had committed to the board that we would attempt to provide 3 years of stability. Of course, humble bragging that we got to 5, which makes me happy. But we really did work to provide 3 years of straight stability after the Cummings Road landfill was closed, after the burn ash site was remediated. We had a number of projects that we completed in a swift amount of time and required a lot of work, not just from the board in general, but even on the tip fee itself to propel us forward. And this was a great time for that smoothing. So when the LEA requested that fee increase, we just adjusted what staff needed for the year to cover it. This year, we think with that 5 years of stability, that small change in the tip fee is an easy ask of our ratepayers and of the board moving forward. And as you'll see in attachment B, underneath those non-bolded rates, which are the current rates, you'll see the percentage increases. That 57 cents is a 2.5% increase to the countywide program fees, but when spread across the other fees, the satellite fees, the franchise fees, and the self-haul fees at the Hawthorne Street Transfer Station, we're talking less than 1% increases. And that's not something you normally would have seen in the past. It would have been 1% or more. It was always, much bigger jumps. This is a tiny adjustment for an item that is ultimately out of the authority's control. If the LEA asks for that number, we need to pass it along. And so that's one of the first things we're asking board direction on. The next is, in order for staff to maintain no change internally, we're asking the board to outlay approximately $188,000 from the Capital Improvement Fund to offset annual expenses. We've done this the past few years. Going back to the diesel crisis that I mentioned in 2008, we drastically increased our tip fees. And in doing so, we covered costs at the moment, but then there wasn't a lot of adjustment to those fees in future years. And what happened was over time, we gained a lot more cash on hand than we actually needed. So based on the projects that we've implemented in the capital improvement plan, and based on how much money we really need in the reserves, we've been requesting, and the board has been directing, drawdowns from those reserves to maintain that 0% change. This is the last year we'll probably be able to do this. The capital improvement fund is pretty lean. However, it is fully funded for the coming fiscal year 2022. And as I've mentioned before, when we sunset that debt, looking at the 2023 fiscal year for the budget, we will have $800,000 minimum to discuss using for capital improvement projects, new programs, or pretty much anything else. And at the very, very end of the line, and this is for you, Rex, we could talk about lowering the tip fee for the first time in a long time. And so there are so many options we have that using our reserves above and beyond what we need is a great tool to provide not only the board with continued stability, but our ratepayers with that long-term stability as well. No changes at the gate is a great feeling, and it really confuses customers when we aren't constantly raising our rates, but in a good way. And finally, the last direction we're asking for immediately in this draft budget is for the board to freeze 2 of our materials diversion tech positions. These are the main operation positions at the transfer station. And 2 of the positions basically committed to recycling activities are over and above what our current activities are. Now, a lot of that comes from the cessation of CRV buyback services. But until we have a plan for implementing those, we can save money in the budget by freezing the positions. At such time as we have a plan for utilizing them, and this is for anything. This is for CRV buyback. This is for additional hazardous waste management, potentially around treated wood waste, or any other program that we may be asked to implement that we need bodies for. The board can unfreeze those positions, but during the year, we'll recognize savings if they aren't filled from the beginning. And by freezing them, we save money at the outset, which again allows us to maintain the stability in those rates. That's to the tune of about $150,000, so it's not a small ask, but it would be reflected in the tip fee if we don't currently freeze them. And it is kind of a discussion thing.
Tyler,
Yes.
how many positions are we, or how many people aren't working because we're not doing CRV now?
2. It's literally, so funny enough, we've had 2 either retirements or people who have quit and moved on. And we just haven't refilled those positions. Everybody else on staff is working.
So what are they? Okay. Because we used to have a lot more than 2 people taking CRV before.
It's mostly the way the numbers work out. We usually would provide the entire staff almost fully devoted to CRV. But of course, there's other projects going on in the recycling center. So rather than having 8 people devoted full-time to CRV and then other recycling activities, we now have 6 doing all of the services over 7 days. So that 2-person difference is really just the cost of providing CRV at the moment.
Okay.
And it's just right now, we're still feeling out a lot of our services. So I have to admit that like part of this is we're pausing those while we're trying to utilize the rest of our staff as efficiently as possible without costing jobs. So we are using everybody and we will use them to enhance the services we currently have. The pause is on the people that would basically directly impact services that we aren't currently providing over and above. So yeah, in review of that, basically the main 3 directions we're asking from the board tonight, which are already built into the budget, are to freeze those 2 positions, to outlay the $188,000 from reserves, and to direct the 57-cent increase in tip fees. Which all will be reflected in the final budget as well with those final tweaks. Beyond that, there are some discussion items that we always bring forward at the draft budget. We have included $15,000 for the RMDZ, which is the Recycling Market Development Zone. These funds are currently going to the Humboldt County Economic Development Division. Allison Tanz has provided us with a scope of work for the coming fiscal year and will be providing us with a report from the last year. Of course, they've hit some struggles with the pandemic, as we all have in getting projects done, but they have a lot going on and have, again, requested that $15,000, which the board has always been very supportive of, and so we have continued to include it. And finally, going back to the CIP, even though it isn't included in the draft budget, it is an item which the board can direct new items into as they desire. So if there's a project or a program that we haven't considered yet that you'd like to see funded in this budget, it's certainly something staff can take back and work on. I would caution, again, we do have sort of that blank slate coming up in the next fiscal year to consider. Before we add too much to this year, where we are running quite a bit tighter, but we're still providing a very minimal increase to the tip fees. With that, I have talked quite a bit, but I am open to any conversation, especially on the budget detail, if board members are interested, and I am sure Executive Director Duffy and I are more than happy to tag team your questions.
Does any of the board members have a question for Tyler?
I see Leslie with her hand raised.
Unmute, ask away.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Now, I support, freezing the positions related to CRV. I'm just curious if we were to resume CRV, this is asking you to speculate a little bit, but how many positions would we need to resume that service?
So my answer to that, and Jill may have a different answer or a little bit more to add to it, but if we were to resume at the facility, we're talking 2 positions. If that is assuming that we resume at the service that we left off at, which we know that there are some difficulties with just because of traffic management, the use of appointments may change some of that, and what other abilities we look at to handle CRV. Part of what I was leaning towards is that there may be a bigger response to CRV than simply reopening the Eureka Recycling Center to that service. But if we are to do it right where we're at right now, 2 positions, both of which can be handled from either the Personnel Stabilization Reserve and or the Rate Stabilization Reserve.
I have one more question. Just in terms of SB 1383, it seems like we don't need to make too much consideration for that in this budget. I mean, especially as, our municipalities haven't really made decisions around that yet. So that would be looking at forthcoming years.
And it's just an example I use of an item that is really at the forefront of everybody's mind, but we also don't know what its impacts are going to be yet to either member agencies or HWMA as a potential participant. It's just a really good example of we probably won't talk about it for a year, but if we did, that's why we have some of these extra reserves. So yeah, absolutely. I'm not anticipating anything coming up, but that usually comes back to bite me a couple of months into the budget. So.
Does anyone else have a question for Tyler?
Rex is looking deep in thought.
No, I'm good.
Well, with that, the direction that we are looking for doesn't necessarily need to be a vote, but if you could give us general direction so that we can move forward with finalizing the budget. If the board is okay with the freezing of the positions in addition to authorizing, which will actually occur in May, but going ahead and planning for the transfer of those reserve funds, incorporating the RMDZ, just wanting to make sure that we weren't, having any additional increases in addition to the LEA's request for the 57-cent increase. The Board of Supervisors will take that particular issue up probably in, it's usually been in late August, early September, when the fees get set. But that's when that would go into effect. I do want to note, and I know that Mario is here on the line, and I did have a conversation with him around the fact that for a number of years, the county LEA has been having conversations with the city of Fortuna so that the tonnage which is generated within Fortuna jurisdiction, is also assessed the LEA fee, because to date, it's been HWMA customers that have been bearing 100% of the cost of providing the LEA services. In my conversations with the LEA, they're indicating that they were making some headway last year prior to the suspension of a lot of activities. So I'm hoping that they will continue and get this particular issue resolved, because it will ultimately begin to stabilize and decrease the amount of money that HWMA ratepayers are having to currently cover for the LEA services. I don't know if Mario wants to add anything more to that, but that is an important thing for board members to keep in mind. So that's basically what we're looking for from the board in order to move forward with the budget. We will have a meeting in April specifically with the Executive Advisory Committee, this is all the city managers and the CAO, so that we can lay out a more refined version. And then the item will come back to you all for consideration and approval at the May meeting. And we could finalize things. And I also want to note that you're not hearing any conversation around curbside recycling impacts. At this juncture, we did receive a rate adjustment request. We are in discussions with Recology now, and we will bring back that final information to the board at the May meeting as well. And the conversations are going very well. So with that, maybe I'll ask, does anybody object to any of this?
Any comment to Jill's question?
I'm not seeing any hands raised, so this is making me feel good.
Okay. Yeah, very good. All right, with that, I feel like we've got the direction needed to move forward with refining the budget in the next month and a half, and we'll look forward to seeing you all on this topic in May.
All right, thank you.
I would ask Frank if there's any public comment on this.
Well, that's where Tyler said he didn't see any hands, but do we have any public comment?
Yeah, I would like to represent the LEA and just clarifying that it is our intent to make contact with the city of Fortuna again and see if we can come to an agreement and get them to pitch in on what their fair share is of the LEA payment. And we still have 6 months before we usually take an agenda item to the Board of Supervisors and ask for a fee increase. Although I think we could create a new agenda item if and bring it earlier than the usual fee schedule season. I haven't heard an urgency from our public health fiscal for a need like that, so I don't envision that happening. But the LEA plan is to reprioritize those discussions with the city of Fortuna. So thanks for that opportunity.
Mario,
Yes, sir.
what is going to be your selling point that stimulates Fortuna to jump on board and pay?
Well, I think
what
there's
are they going to get for it that they're not getting now?
well, the PRC requires that they pay. They're currently being subsidized by other ratepayers in HWMA. The LEA does provide services within the city limits, which they benefit from. And
Like,
we investigate complaints. We help with solid waste sites. Currently, the LEA is ensuring that there's no landfill gases with the Allen Mackey site and things like that that are responsibilities of the LEA, and they provide a health and safety protection service and satisfy the mandate that is a state law.
okay.
And if you guys have any questions, feel free to contact me during the week sometime or send me an email. I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Mario. So with that, I think we will, if there's no other members of the public that would like to address the board at this juncture, I'm not seeing anybody either, so I'm just not wanting to move off too quickly just by virtue of having limited vision here.
I don't see any hands raised, so.
Okay, so with that, we'll be moving on to our next agenda item, Frank.
That next item is item 5, standing item is review update on Cal Recycle CRV beverage container program.
Yeah, great, thank you. So it'll be my turn to go through a few things. So one thing I do want to note is the county CAO's office submitted a letter similar to the ones that the cities have taken up, urging that representatives take urgent legislative action to provide CRV relief. And the city of Eureka also approved a letter on February 16th. And those letters have been collected and forwarded to multiple organizations like CSAC and RCRC and California League of Cities in order to help continue elevating and promoting an awareness of this at the statewide level. I do want to note that over the last few weeks, there have been some legislative activity pertaining to CRV. And on Friday last week, that was the last day in which to introduce legislation for this session. There were 3 spot bills or placeholders that were introduced, and then there were 2 full bills that were introduced pertaining to CRV. SB 451 proposes to increase the number of pilot projects from 5 to 10 total, and that will extend that time frame to 2023. We talked about this at the last meeting. Now the legislation has been introduced that would enable that. AB 1067 is authored by Assemblymember Ting, and that particular bill would require the Cal Recycle to approve or deny completed recycling center applications to a 45 calendar day window instead of 60 days from the point that an application is deemed complete. So it's just basically a shortening, pretty limited bill. AB 1311, which was sponsored by Assemblymember Wood, basically makes non-substantive changes to the bottle bill. Specifically, it discusses some beverage container definitions. That could, however, change as the session goes on. And as I noted, those placeholder bills do contain minimal content. There's a couple of other bills to be watching for. Senate Bill 38 is authored by Assemblymember Wachowski, and honestly, this is the one that actually has a lot of potential promise in that it would change. It would bring change to the bottle bill and turn it into a stewardship organization, and look more like Oregon or Michigan. And it would probably be a bill that a lot of recyclers will end up supporting. Another bill that's been introduced is SB 1454, which is authored by Bloom and O'Donnell. And honestly, at first blush, AB 1454 appears to be reasonable because it establishes an advisory board to Cal Recycle and will allow Cal Recycle to designate regional convenience zones serving multiple unserved zones and require that recycling centers pay consumers the CRV value at the time that they bring the material in, which they already do for us, or within 5 days if they are paid using electronic payment. So I think it's really geared towards those recycling centers that are doing electronic payment for material. And that Cal Recycle would also amend the processing fee payments for those materials whose scrap value is less than the cost of processing. However, I want to note that there have been a number of revisions to that particular bill, which have been more to the benefit of the waste haulers, the grocers, as well as beverage manufacturers. With the creation of a 9-member advisory board, they don't have any identified authority to make legislative changes. Cal Recycle would be required to consult with the board, but it does not appear that the board would actually have any way to give direction or reject what is being proposed to them. So Cal Recycle would be initiating different reviews or expanding their policies and guidelines, or budgetary changes impacting the beverage container program. And basically it ends up at this juncture looking like it would be more of a bureaucratic hurdle. It would provide collection haulers an additional $25 million. And then of course, with the exception of potentially more exemptions, there's no changes or responsibilities to grocers as the obligated retailers. And of course, it does not address the issue of the beverage manufacturers. There would be a slight increase payment for processing payments to all recycling centers of about $1,800 per month. And a proposal to, instead of having just a singular processing payment, they would break it up into large, medium, and small instead of the singular one, but it would keep the statewide average formula, which of course is one of the reasons that we've seen so many of the smaller private recycling centers here on the North Coast fail. So it's not quite the fix that we would be looking for. So essentially, the bills have been introduced. They're going to be working their way through committee, and they've got 2 years to become either approved or they will die. And of course, Cal Recycle would still need about 2 years in order to write the regulations for implementation. So we're still looking at a pretty far horizon. So recognizing that, there have been about 10 different groups that are now calling on Governor Newsom specifically, urging him to modernize the California's beverage recycling program, stating the obvious of what we all know. And the letter does point out that with over 1,300 beverage container redemption centers closing across the state, there are numerous communities who don't have a center for their residents to recycle the cans and bottles and reclaim their deposit. One of the things that was kind of interesting in their letter that I want to just call out is they've identified that statewide, it's an average of just one redemption center per 23,000 people. However, in the Bay Area, the figure is 1 in 60,000 people, which is, an even worse ratio as far as a deposit program. And then of course there's Humboldt County, in which we don't have anything either. So the groups are all urging the governor to take action and really focusing on having that consumer convenience with high collection targets and manufacturer responsibility and whatnot. So with that, that concludes the CRV update. For the moment, I anticipate coming to the board in April with some suggested positions around these pieces of legislation. There might be a couple of other activities. It's been pretty fluid just in the last, week and a half, just tracking what's been happening on this particular item. Any questions?
Was there, through the chair, looking at the state budget, wasn't there $10 million more for pilot programs in this year's budget?
I believe that's been put into the budget, and I think that was going to be done through an appropriation directly through Cal Recycle. I don't think they needed to have legislation to make that happen, but I'm not quite certain about it, and I haven't.
No, it was
seen
in the
yet.
budget. There was no legend. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But are we going to maybe try for something along those lines this time?
So we had. Yeah,
we have 0 for 135,000 redemption centers.
Correct. And so we can't apply obviously until the bill is approved, but at the point that we've got an opportunity, we'll be going back to the plan that we proposed, see if we can make some improvements and move forward with that. So Cal Recycle staff has indicated that the earliest that they'd be looking at having applications available would be mid-July or August, providing everything lined up correctly.
So can we put out another press release that says if you're waiting for your recyclables, it ain't gonna happen? I mean, I still get 4 or 5 phone calls a day. I mean, go, well, how come I can go to Crescent City? And I'm going, because they're 90 miles smarter than we are.
Right.
I mean, I don't have a good answer why Crescent City does it. And we abandoned ours. I still don't have a great answer.
Okay. Okay.
And I guess I still don't.
So with that, that concludes. Any other questions?
Any other questions on this? Is there, Jill, is there a, and obviously Cal Recycle still continues to collect CRV money themselves. It's going somewhere. Is there?
So oh, I do want to note one other thing. So yes, the money that is collected by CRV is continuing to be collected by Cal Recycle, in addition to grocers who opt for the $100 a day fine instead of providing CRV buyback services in store. That money is also held by Cal Recycle. I believe that they're looking at generating just shy of $500,000 out of Humboldt County grocers who are opting not to provide the service. CalRecycle does have a website. You can go to calrecycle.ca.gov and go to the in-store redemption. And on that site, they have identified 48 different locations in Humboldt County where people can redeem their CRV containers. There are some that are doing it. The difference is they are allowed to put limits on the number of containers that people are bringing back. If you go to a site and they are not providing that service, then people need to complain to CalRecycle that they went to a site that had signed an affidavit. That's how they get onto the CalRecycle list, and note that they are refusing to accept CRV materials. It doesn't deal with the backlog of pounds and pounds of CRV, but it is a doorway which is opening for people to begin collecting their deposits back.
Jill, the problem being is, what do they do with them after they pay and let them bring it in? I mean, what they're doing, and I'm watching all these guys write their checks because I get copies of them every time I'm writing another check.
Mhm.
They're just doing the same thing we did. We're not taking any more, but we collect $500,000 a year to help with our recycling programs. I'm just feeling somewhere that we're dropping the ball, and I don't know what it is. I mean, we years ago HWMA took this on, and then when we couldn't do it anymore, and I just feel like we're letting the people down, and now we're taking the easy route out. Let's give it to the grocery stores. The grocery stores are going to write that $3,100 check every month, but it's not coming out of their back pocket. It's coming out of our pocket again. So we're paying. They're picking up another $3,100 plus the nickel. And
Completely agree.
I just don't feel like we're doing enough, and maybe that's just me, but.
So I want to note that those checks aren't being made out to HWMA. Those checks are being made out to CalRecycle. And the conversation that we had with the new executive director, she's identified that they are all obligated retailers, and that's part of their responsibility. That is one of the reasons why the Wykowski bill looks to be more attractive, because it shifts the model from being built on the grocery stores into a stewardship program where you have standalone type of redemption centers. And the way the bottle bill was initially put together was not that the material was going to recycling centers, but the material was being collected by grocers. And that is where the fundamental framework of the program was developed.
What are one of the 48 stores doing this?
I can take a look at it real quick.
Oh no, I've looked at it. I've been to a few of them, and they're not doing it. So
So again, I encourage you to let CalRecycle know. I mean, I'm aware of a couple. I'm sorry?
I'm not going to tell them nothing. They're the part of the problem. I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus that's already not under the bus.
So
these are retailers we get our tax dollars from. Let's throw them under the bus.
Well, suffice to say, CalRecycle can't change it if they're not aware of it. So we are told that there are 48 locations where people can redeem their containers. And it's taking forever to load. I'm sorry.
Well, then Rex, CalRecycle says there's 48 locations, and then you're saying there's really nobody.
I haven't been able to find one. I'm gonna relook again at the site, but I'm not walking around with a bag of cans walking into the store. But you would see that activity, I'm sure, and you don't see anybody saying it. Has anybody recycled anything in the store?
Yeah. We've had a couple people that have come in because, and they noted that a couple of the gas stations are taking containers, but they're doing limited amounts. So my internet is, slow.
How do the stores, if they pay out the nickel, how does the store get his nickel back?
They are then transporting the material to either Crescent City or to Reading or down into the Ukiah area. So Broadway Gas for Less, Eureka Natural Foods, Fairway Plus, Redwood Market, Smart Foods Service Warehouse, also Stop and Shop, Walgreens, and they only list like a handful on each page. So
That's fine.
between having the Zoom going, internet, and the television, our broadband is all eaten up. So yeah, those are a sampling of locations that have agreed to provide those services to CalRecycle.
Quick question to the chair. Is there a way to, you mentioned, that Humboldt County is paying CalRecycle's $500,000, for a service we're not getting. Is there a way to leverage that in any way?
Are you referring to me?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's been one of the conversations that we've had with both Senator McGuire and Assemblymember Woods' office. And if you think about the letters that all of your organizations have submitted in addition to our letter, we have been asking, can the money that is being directed to CalRecycle, can that stay within the county to help to facilitate the development of CRV redemption sites? Under state statute, that money is collected by CalRecycle and they hold it into a pot. They have no discretion. Then they have to be given authorization from the state legislature as to how that money is utilized, which again is why we've mentioned that in those letters to our state representatives. So the only other workaround, if you will, is if those grocers want to enter into an agreement with the an area recycler, so it could be Humboldt Sanitation or Recology or HWMA, in order to help offset some of the cost that's associated with providing the service. So that is something that could be done because again, now you're ensuring that there's a provided service. So that doesn't have there'd be a lot of work behind that. It could be done. But the grocers that we were having some conversations with have since opted to pay into the state fund. Hope that helps.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to close that item and go on to item 6, which is standing member reports. Are there any how to do a roll call, or how do we do any agencies have anything to report?
Usually I do a roll call for this, Frank.
Why don't you do a roll call then?
Absolutely. Pereira.
No report, thank you.
Castellano.
Nothing to report.
Hogan.
What?
Bone.
No, I've got some stuff on SB 1383 that I think Jill has from the Rural Counties Environmental Services Joint Powers Authority.
Yep.
That is probably going to help some of us in our far-reaching areas. There's quite a bit of difference between organic collection service and, and mandatory organic collection. So it may make a big difference financially for us, or especially for the haulers. So, and so I'll get that to her and she can distribute it to you guys.
And Wilson.
Nothing to report. All right, in that case, that closes that item, and then we move on to executive director report.
So as follow-up to our green waste dilemma that was reported at the last meeting, I'm happy to note that green waste is once again being accepted by Mad River Hardwoods, and Wes and Teresa Green have resumed ownership and operation, and they've changed the West Green Landscaping's name to West Green Company. They entered into a settlement agreement. They now have full control. They're getting things all together. And I really want to thank Humboldt Sanitation, in addition to Recology, and especially Dry Creek Landfill for helping to bail us out during a few weeks there, while the family members had an opportunity to resolve the dispute and to reopen and resume the green waste businesses. Our transportation of solid waste, as board members are likely very well aware, was both delayed and interrupted because of the ongoing highway closures that have been associated with last chance grade since about February 15th. So again, we transport approximately 170 tons per day of member agency material and public public trash through that road section. And when the highway is closed, we were having to, we stored it for a little while, but then we had to haul it over Highway 299 up to 5, staging the trailers in the Anderson area so that another truck can come down. It adds a considerable drive time, cost, and of course, fewer trailers that are available in our rotation. On the 24th of February, some HWMA material was hauled to Potrero Hills, which is located in Suisun City. Some of our older board members, if you will recall that we were having material transported down there underneath our prior agreement with Solid Waste of Willits. And so the county, LEA, as well as Cal Recycle were notified, and they approved of the temporary change of destination. And so while there's a slight cost increase, the overall cost was less expensive than the Highway 299 I-5 route. Gary may be available to speak to this when I am complete with my presentation. Again, just really want to thank, I can't begin to, appreciate Bettendorf and Dry Creek for all of their ongoing and vigilant efforts. And there's just been nimble responsiveness. There's no other word for it, ensuring that all of our material is getting picked up and hauled out in a timely manner. With respect to treated wood waste, that particular activity has been sort of suspended for the moment because of some of the disruptions that we experienced between the green waste and the solid waste, coordination. So we haven't been able to quite resolve the questions related to DTSC before applying for a variance. And of course, Dry Creek Landfill will also be required to get a variance from DTSC. So that is something that we will continue working on. In December, I let the board know that our solid waste permit was approved by the county LEA as well as Cal Recycle in December of 2020. We are also, on March 1st, our transfer processing report amendment, which basically outlines outlines and establishes the standards related to our permitted solid waste operations. So when the LEA is coming in and performing their regular inspections, they are using this document to ensure that we are meeting the standards of the document that has been approved. Actually two things real quick. One is just a quick reminder to all board members, our HWMA managers, and our contractors that we need to have our FPPC Form 700 submitted to HWMA, which is due April 1st. And then, of course, the local task force will be holding their next meeting on Wednesday, March 24th at 2 o'clock via Zoom. And if anybody's interested in getting an invite for that, they can either contact myself or Donna Wood with the city of Eureka, and we can get you an invite to that particular meeting. Tyler, will you go ahead and give me a share screen real quick?
You should be all set. You can take it anytime you want.
Okay, there we are. Just want to share a couple of pictures. Slideshow, they can start. There was a Samoa Beach beautification project, which was conducted by RCAA and the Samoa Peninsula Samoa Peninsula Community Group, and they sent a few photos along because they reached out to us to see if we had any paint that could be utilized for part of their beautification project. And so here they are with some of the, this is all paint that had been delivered to HWMA. And so they were able to utilize it by painting some of the K-rails and some of the other items out there. They're trying to make an effort at reducing the amount of dumping which has been occurring within their community. Just, you know, people just running out there and dumping materials. And that's, I believe this was the last one. That's the big share for the moment. So that concludes my items. I just want to double check. Gary, is there anything else that you would want to add related to last chance grade?
Yeah, I just wanted to actually thank the authority for working with us. We know we had some material that wasn't getting moved as fast as we'd like, and been working with Michael McCallum to set up, should we have closures on 101 again, a yard where they'll be able to transport that waste a little bit better and and not push the driver hours. That's an issue going south. So we'll try to set that up, and between fires and landslides and maybe the big shake, hopefully in the next 6 to 9 months, we'll have several alternates set up should we have road closures coming off the coast. And we're not going to do it just for the coast. We have issues, you know, even in Siskiyou County with fires and sometimes roads being closed due to snow and ice. So it's just another item on a list of many right now that we're all dealing with emergency preparedness. So thank you all for your time and business.
Thank you for all your help. And Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
All right. And that brings us to the next item would be adjournment. And we don't have to do a motion to adjourn here, do we?
No, we do not.
We do have to do a motion?
We do not.
We do not. Okay. Then I guess we are adjourned.
Have a nice evening, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
All right.